Welcome to No Filter Femme. Today we're going to be talking about Rebel Love. This is a podcast where we break down barriers and we're redefining romance for women over 40. I'm Melia Arnett Archie, co-host of this wonderful show.
And I'm Kelli Mason, your co-host as well. And we are here to explore the joys and challenges of love, relationships, and intimacy over 40 with honesty, humor, and heart.
And whether you're single, dating, in a long-term relationship, newly divorced, we're here to share our stories, insights, and help you navigate romance over 40 at every stage, whichever stage you might be, with no filter.
Ooh, no filter.
With no filter.
So grab your favorite beverage, get comfy, and join us as we embark on this unapologetically bold and empowering journey. This is No Filter Femme Rebel Love Edition.
So again, today's episode is all about redefining love after 40. And we're calling it Rebel Love because it may not look like anything we've ever seen before.
Yeah. It may not look like anything we've ever seen before. And also, I feel like love is often defined in your 20s and 30s, and it just looks so different in your 40s, 50s, 60s. And I feel like it looks different because obviously we're at a different age,
Yeah.
at a different stage in our life. But we may be divorced and this is round 2, maybe this is round 3, or we were married at a younger age and now we're divorced and my things have changed.
How things have changed.
Or, like in my case, heads down in ministry and career and just putting my head up for the first time in my late 30s and totally out of sorts, out of my element on what dating looks like, what the expectations are, where to even find guys.
Yeah. Oh.
The whole topic of online dating is we could probably do a whole episode on
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. It is interesting times. Mm-hmm. We're both married now.
Yeah.
But, certainly we have girlfriends and family members who are our age, over 40, who are dating. And, we get to hear all the fun stories about what that means.
Yeah.
But even in addition to dating and relationships and romance, we have to talk about how things like menopause impacts love over 40.
Yeah.
Sex.
Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Over 40.
Over 40. And I think another interesting subtopic here is, would you do it again?
Yeah.
And, I have an interesting take on that.
Uh-huh. I'm looking forward to that.
So we're going to talk about it with no filter at all. So let's dive into some personal experiences that might be helpful to our listening audience, to start thinking about how they are defining love at 40, over 40. Yeah.
So I've had a really interesting conversation in the comment section of one of my posts on Instagram. And what I have found through many conversations, and primarily with women, has been very surprising to me. And I would say the vast majority of the women that I was, conversing with were around our age, or in our general age, within a 10-year age range. And it was very intriguing to me because I feel like the narrative that is often projected, particularly in social media spaces, is that women as a whole, particularly Black women, are still in this "I don't need a man"
Oof. Yeah.
banner, mantra, marching orders. And what I found, though, is the contrary, that there is a large contingency of us who still really want love.
Yeah.
And not just love, kind of check off the box love, but really looking for a healthy connection, a good connection. Where are the men?
Yeah.
Where are they and all the things? And so I do think that oftentimes over 40, we can believe a narrative that we have been told that there aren't many men available,
Right.
there aren't many options. And then I think we start thinking and believing that and really start insulating ourselves, even though our heart's desire
Yeah.
is that we really want love.
Oh, that's so good. I think the ability to thine own self be true, right? And there's so many external factors that I think can impact our truths if we allow them, right? And that's why it's so important to have this conversation because, you know, we talked about it in earlier episodes, just about really getting to know yourself and the truth about what you want out of love, romance, life, period. And that requires, I think, some deep introspection, deep evaluation about, you know, how you're showing up in the world, what's existing in your world right now, and whether or not it's truly representative not only of what you want, but of what you deserve.
That's good. Especially the what you deserve part. Because I do think that many of us, you know, just as we were having the conversation with the ladies in our last episode, had such preconceived notions of what marriage looks like, what relationships look like, what single life looks like, what sex looks like, single and inside of a marriage. And I feel like after 40, you start saying, okay, well, no, whoa, wait a minute. I know what I've been told and taught.
Yeah.
But A, is that still true? B, is it true for me?
Yeah.
And C, does that align with where I'm heading?
Ooh.
Because the truth be told, you know, if I really went with what I assumed I wanted in a mate, honey, I was marrying a preacher. Listen, we were going to be the black, traveling Paula White, and the black version of what her husband would be.
Yeah.
We were going to be co-pastors. We were going to be co-evangelists. We were going to be traveling the world, ministering the gospel. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but at the time, I was just completely focused on that. But I'm very clear now that maybe even at that time, that may have been what I desired. I don't know that it was really my soul assignment. And so if I had continued on that very dogged determination of I need a man that then fits that mold, as I continued on my spiritual journey, there would be a dissonance.
Yeah. Oof.
Currently, because I've now genuinely created this image.
Yeah.
And in my mind globally, because we were going to be traveling around the globe.
Yeah.
We were going to have our own jet. Like I had the whole
yeah.
image and vision. And perhaps that would have been a different path and I would have continued on that path. But now where I am, it would be a bit challenging if I was with a very traditionally, religiously experienced man.
Yeah. I mean, I think you said one word that I want to go back to, and that's the mold. And whether it is the mold that you described in what you had sort of predefined as, you know, what a marriage looked like for you, only to sort of grow and mature and experience in later in life, recognize that isn't, you know, maybe not your true soul assignment. I think that as women, we often create molds.
I agree.
Right? You know, he has to, you know, make six figures. He has to, you know, have never been married before, never have had children. Like we have these lists or molds that I think, and hear me when I say, I am not at all saying that you shouldn't have some healthy preferences, expectations, and desires in a mate.
Right.
But I do think, and what I learned from my personal journey leading up to you know, meeting my husband, who, okay, just for context, my husband, I'm the first Black woman my husband's ever dated.
Really?
Yes. I dated interracially often and came into the relationship with a biracial daughter. I was, again, even around the time that I met my husband, I was dating, you know, outside of my race, and I love men. Okay, let me. I love an array of men, different ethnicities. Yeah, the rainbow. But my husband absolutely had not dated a black woman before me. But even in meeting him for the first time, physically had nothing to do with the color of his skin. He wouldn't have been what I would have picked out of a crowd for myself.
Okay.
Right? I mean, there were just a lot of things that I was like, it's all right, but it doesn't tick all my boxes.
Yeah.
And then we gave it a chance. I went out on a date, and I recognized he was probably the smartest man I ever met in my life. And, our attraction was not physical first, at least for me.
Okay.
It wasn't physical first. When that had been white, black, yellow, whatever, I had, there was a picture that needed to make sense for me in terms of, it's not that he's not handsome, please, because I think he's extremely handsome. He just wasn't my type physically.
I get that.
And I think when we have these lists and these molds, especially when they are a little superficial,
a lot superficial,
we can miss out on great love, great relationships. And so my challenge to all of the women in our community is to, to challenge that. Go back and look at that list. Go back and look at those, I can't live without these things. If he doesn't have all of the tick all these boxes, then he's not for me. And make sure your boxes make sense for what you say you want, because you might be pricing yourself out of the market.
That's good. That's really good. Pricing yourself out of the market. And also, I do think our internet, online, TV, media spaces can greatly impact what more than we may even really realize, myself included. Because I had those lists. I had the, 666, the six pack, the 6 foot tall, 6 figures.
Yeah.
But honey, my husband is not 6 foot tall. I think he doesn't have a 6 pack. And at the time was not making 6 figures. And so if I had gone by that list, I would have missed out on such an amazing soul.
Yeah.
And an amazing man. And I think, what I hear you saying too is in that moment, you gave it a shot.
Yeah.
Like, that's the biggest thing that I hear from you is like, I gave it a shot. It wasn't, kind of the path that I had been going as it relates to men. But here I am in hindsight thinking, wow, what if I hadn't given that a shot?
Exactly. And I did try to sabotage it, which we often do.
We all do that.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like he asked me out on a date, and my first answer was, because I was on the fence about whether or not I wanted to give it a try. And so I made up some excuse that I had a work thing, and we couldn't go out. And I'll never forget, he lived in Washington, D.C. at the time. I lived in Miami, and I met him. He was on a guy's trip to Miami. And a mutual friend of ours invited me out to a night out with the guys. So I went, and the next day he called. He got my number that night. The next day he called and asked me out on a date. I gave him the lame excuse as to why I couldn't go. And I said to him as I was about to close out the conversation, but if you're in Miami again, please do reach out, right? Just playing coy, like, I'm not taking it seriously. And he said to me, I will definitely be in Miami again, but I cannot promise you I'll reach out.
Oh,
girl. And I was like, and we got off the phone. I mean, that was it. We got off the phone. And I remember I just kind of sat back like, what do you mean?
So intrigued.
Yeah, like now I need to know. You're gonna come to Miami, you're not gonna reach out. Like,
why? I love that though.
But he challenged me because, like, one, I think he could see through my excuse.
Yeah.
And it was a challenge for me, and one that I'm glad that I took on, because I called him back.
Okay.
A few hours later, I said, you know what? My calendar's cleared.
It's suddenly cleared up.
It's cleared up. So, let's do dinner. And we met at Big Pink on Miami Beach for all of the Miamians, exactly where I'm talking about. And we sat out in front of that restaurant until about 3:00 in the morning. Talking.
Wow.
And it was absolutely the best connection. And we've been together ever since. I've never had a better connection with anyone that I dated before. So yeah, but that's how that happened. He challenged my boxes.
Okay.
And forced me to take a look at, why am I self-sabotaging? Why am I not giving this a try? I mean, he's a nice guy. So yeah, that's kind of my story.
But you know what I love about that story? And I think that's really key when we are a bit older, when we've met somebody, when we're meeting somebody. Our processing is different, and we've been through some relationship stuff, some life stuff, and we just have a different view. So like, I wonder if when you were younger, would that one statement, I'll definitely be back in Miami, but I don't know if if it would have hit different.
Sure it would have.
And I think that's some of the beauty of life over 40, or love rather over 40 and love later in life. Our ears hear things different. Our eyes see things different. And I think sometimes though, because our eyes see things different and our ears hear things different, we can overthink, we can overcomplicate, we can over engineer instead of just letting it flow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you were intrigued and then you just let it flow.
Yeah.
Like, I think I know I could overanalyze and over engineer and overthink, and I probably would have just thought myself into a tailspin of like, what does that mean? And I would have spent the rest of the night, like you called back. I don't know that I would have called back because I would have been so in my head about what that means instead of just letting it flow.
No, honey, I had to find out. Like, I've not been handled. And so this is another thing. Sometimes we say we want things, and when it shows up, we don't recognize it.
That's true.
Because for me, I've always wanted a real alpha man, like, one that can take me and say, honey, I got it. Like, sit down.
Yeah.
Relax.
Yeah.
Because I can be, hyper anxious, and I think I'm probably an anxious avoidant, and because of some of the things that I've lived through, that my first reaction when things get a little hot is to figure out how to push back from the table, and I'm just not. But having somebody that can sort of look past that and say, I see what you're doing, and I'm going to challenge that because you deserve better than that.
Yeah.
And that's what showed up that night. He said it, and it stung, and it pushed that button because I'd not had a man challenge me like that. I was used to sort of being in the driver's seat.
I get that.
And had gotten very comfortable, even though that's what I said I didn't want. But that was where my comfort level was. And so when he handled me like that, I was like, I need to know more.
Yes, I love a good handling.
Honey. Okay.
But you know what I think too? I think as women, particularly as Black women, as we have become so well educated and so well versed and traveled and assets and careers and entrepreneurial endeavors, success and all those things, I wonder if we've really had an honest conversation with ourselves. And that's what you were mentioning earlier about what we really do. We want someone to handle us, but handle us in a way that isn't abusive or that it isn't harmful. Because there is a finesse.
There's a finesse
for a man, in this particular instance, handling a intelligent, beautiful, successful, accomplished woman on her own. And we've all, even if we feel in those categories, then also have a story that is layered. And they're willing to like ride those layers with us without feeling that they need to dominate us.
Yes.
And without feeling like, well, I'll just let her take the lead.
Yeah.
Like, there's a nuance in there. I feel like, for me, I always heard from men that I was so intimidating. Which then made me, my response, I don't know if this is good or not, but it was my response nonetheless. And I felt like I needed to shrink me in order to be able to uplift you. And this was really me, when me and my husband got together, this was the first time I felt like I could literally just be me. Because I always felt there was something missing in previous relationships. I felt like either I needed to be the spiritual lead, or I needed to be the intellectual lead, or I needed to be the financial lead. But there was still kind of this intimidation factor. But this was the first time where I felt like, you know how you were saying you could just rest, you could just be, like I could still be intelligent, successful, career-oriented Kelli, but I could also just be like, I have no idea how we got here. I literally just sat in the car and we got here somehow because he was driving. And so I do think we need to have the honest conversation of, am I really looking for that power couple, or am I really looking for my definition of a power couple? And what that looks like for me.
That's right. And I think over 40, we talked about it. You know, my time is important to me, and how I'm spending it and whom I'm spending it with. And so when I think even about the girls who are dating, I think that this is an important conversation, right? To be able to define and decide, maybe before you ever create that profile online, or however you're, you know, seeking out companionship. Because if you don't define it, I think the external forces will define it. And that includes social media, that includes all of these images that may be entirely fake, in terms of, because the reality is, and I know you can attest to it too, being married, it does take work, and it's not all glitz and glam every day. You know, there's hard work that's worth it, but nonetheless that you have to go through to become one. Right? And you know, who's doing that with someone who is not meeting you and willing to also put in that same level of work and care. And so I think defining that at the start of the dating process, if looking hindsight being 2020, knowing what I know now over 40, I wouldn't have, to your point, I would have taken the challenge, but I probably wouldn't have had to do the callback. Because now I know when I hear it, okay, now this jives with what I say I want, you know?
I think that's good too. And because at the same time, for, you know, the ladies over 40 that are single, I think that's a broad question and an important one to ask at the beginning of the dating process too, because maybe you're not looking for a relationship at this point.
That's
you
good.
know, how we've chatted about, and I know we want to get there in this conversation, about what if something were to happen, which we don't want to be the case, would either of us ever marry again? Would we do the building and the growing and the learning? Would we just have friends? Would we have a partner, but maybe we wouldn't do the marriage piece again? And so I think those questions, even at the early dating process, are are really important too, because I think, you know, there could be men who are then looking to have this, you know, lock you down, let's do this thing, and that's just not where your energy is at the time. It's like, listen, I am single and ready to mingle, and I think those questions are important to ask too.
And since you brought it up, we can go ahead and go there.
Okay, let's go.
And I think my husband, I was having this conversation with someone else right here in this building, and he was sitting on the other side of the wall, and he heard it. And I think it was the first time that he heard me say it, which was also sort of, you know, another thing to sort of work through, because I had to help him understand what I meant by it. But what my sort of stance on whether or not I would remarry, if something were to happen in my marriage and I was no longer married to my husband, my answer is a strong no. And I'm standing on business with that. But that does not mean I am not in love with my husband. I am not in love with the companionship that I have with him. But I am not willing to work and build again. You know what I mean? I'm riding this till the wheels fall off, but I'm not doing it with anybody else.
Listen.
Now, I think the thing that I do have to work out is because for me spiritually, it is very important for me to, one, right now, because of menopause, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I'm not so sexually driven, so that might also be impacting sort of the way I'm thinking about this, because I'm like, I can live without sex. I mean, but can I really? In a couple of years, that might be different.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But that would be the only issue for me, is that, I personally would not have sex outside of the confines of marriage. So what does that mean for me if I don't want to get married again? Am I also agreeing that I'm never going to have sex again? So I don't have the answer to that, and I'd have to work that out. And I wouldn't want sex to be the only reason why I got married.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because that's a whole other bag of tricks.
Exactly. So, that's a point. And as our community is listening to this, I would love to know what other women who are sort of in my situation and sort of have my perspective, how have you worked through this, if you have, and what are your thoughts about it? Because, it does present a bit of, some a conundrum in terms of, I know I don't want to do the work of building another relationship in marriage. I don't necessarily know that I want to agree never to have sex again. But then I have my own spiritual and religious beliefs that play a part of that. So it gets complicated.
And I am on the fence. I really don't know which way I would go. There's a part of me that feels very strongly about like I'm really a one woman, one partner kind of girl.
Yeah.
Like, I loved my dating time. I just couldn't keep up with it.
Yeah.
It was like a whole job. I literally was calling different guys the wrong name.
Girl.
Because I couldn't remember, like, okay, wait, was this the one? Was that John? So I just started calling him by nicknames. It made it easier for me. So this was the truck driver. And this was...
Is that how you saved their names in your phone?
Yes. I literally did. This was the firefighter. This was the executive.
Tip.
Because I had a roster, and I believe in a roster when you're dating. Because I feel like in our heart and in our mind, it keeps us from focusing on one individual when we're really not ready to settle down with that one individual. But I enjoyed it, but it was a lot of work. And so I really am kind of like a one woman kind of guy. But there's part of me who's like, I don't know that I want to do the building again.
Yeah.
But there's part of me that finds security inside marriage. But I also feel like I could have the security, I could have the comfort, I could have those things outside of an actual marriage. So I'm really on the fence about that one.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it has nothing to do with my current love.
Yeah, this is a whole different time and point in your life.
Yeah, I'm just, saying whatever the circumstance might be that would lend me being single and having to make a decision, I'm confident now, anyway, today, that I wouldn't want to do it again. One, because, I have an 18-year-old and a 4-year-old, which is crazy. But, outside of, when this 4-year-old is graduated and is off to college, I could completely see myself traveling the world with a backpack. There is just, how can I say this? I'm just going to say it because it's no filter, right?
Yeah.
When you are married, you are obviously tied to the person that you're with, and that includes their ideas and their desires in terms of what a life looks like.
Yeah.
And there's compromise there.
Yes.
Right? Like my husband is very country, and he likes to land. I could live in a high rise and, on top of a bodega or whatever and be, so there's that. So I can completely see myself going, into a life where I'm just enjoying the freedom of not having to consider
someone else.
And I know it sounds selfish.
I don't think that sounds selfish,
No?
though. No, I don't. I think that there is, in particular, in my opinion, women who are driven. There are certain things that we're very focused on and we're very clear about.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to experience those things that we're very focused and clear about. And I don't think it's selfish at all to say, I would like to have this experience that allows me the freedom to not have to consider someone else in that decision. And I think,
But you just freed me. Can we pause right there?
yes, we can.
Because that really was helpful, because there is a sort of a guilt that comes along, for me anyway, in feeling that way. Like, I just really could see myself, again, in a situation where I were to be single again, just completely doing what I wanted to do. And, not having to, again, be considerate of the compromise necessary to make another relationship work at this level. And when I say it, I kind of feel guilty for saying it. Like, oh, well, that sounds selfish. Yeah. And so you saying that back to me, I think really helps me feel free to know that, okay, it's okay to desire the time and the space just to do you.
Yeah. Because I think that goes back to, in a previous episode, we were talking about the very rigid definition of womanhood.
Yeah. Ooh.
And the hierarchy of, in that instance, we were talking about children. But we briefly touched on marriage being a part of that hierarchy. Yeah. It's kind of like you go up a rung when you get married. You go up another rung when you have children. But what if life circumstances changes what your life look like? So am I going down a couple rungs?
No.
Because I've decided that, no, I really enjoyed the time that I had with my spouse. Yeah. And two things can be true at the same time. I really enjoyed that. And now I'm in a life circumstance that I wasn't expecting, but here I am. That doesn't make me selfish, though, for deciding, but for this part of my journey, I want to take this part of my journey and do this.
And that's that redefining.
That is that redefining.
That is so necessary. You're because, right. Even as we're sitting here talking and I feel like I'm clear on what I want, but, that shame comes up, that comes from that historical, antiquated definition, like you said, of what womanhood really is. And when you gave that example about the ladder and the rungs on the ladder, like it doesn't, when I hear you say it like that, I'm like, yeah, like I'm not taking steps down because I'm choosing me. I mean, that makes sense to me, but yet everything in me emotionally and psychologically fights against that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a continued work is in defining what love looks like after 40, after marriage.
Yeah.
And before marriage, because I mean, this is the work that if you are not married yet, I would strongly encourage you to do before.
Yes.
Before.
Because it will inform your decisions moving forward.
Absolutely.
Because I do think that, truth be told, and we've talked about off camera how these are kitchen table talk conversations that we're then bringing into a public space. And that's the beauty of No Filter Femme. I think, truth be told, there are a lot of us in marriages that if we had our druthers and if we knew information later, earlier, we may have made different decisions.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important that, in my opinion, we're shifting towards redefining womanhood, period.
Yeah.
And what that looks like. And I think a part of that is really valuable after 40.
Well, because I think women are generally getting married later.
Yeah, true.
And so I think that naturally there's a wiser woman showing up at the altar.
I agree.
Which I think is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Because, experiencing life and experiencing and getting to know yourself is so important, again, in that decision-making process.